Hi, this is Jay Silber for the Haifa Report. We've been talking about life in the middle of attacks from Iran and Hezbollah, and we have reported that life in Haifa sometimes seems quite normal, and other times more than a bit frightening. And in the cocoon of our shelters, we do feel protected. But last week, an Iranian missile struck a home in Haifa, maybe a kilometer from where I live, and 4 people were killed. The destroyed house, the one on the left in this photo, was right next to a home, the one on the right, occupied for many years by my cousin and her family. They no longer live there. But the destruction and deaths involved here bring home to me, in a way I hadn't experienced before, the horrors of this war. Peace talks between Israel and Lebanon, between the United States and Iran, are all supposed to be taking place at the time of this recording on April 11th, 2026. While that's taking place, the worldviews of Israel have turned more and more negative. The very concept of Zionism today is thought of by many on the left, including many American Jews, as something hateful and harmful to oppressed people in lands Israel occupies, attacks, or controls. The worldview of Zionism, from a movement that after the Second World War, many around the world believed in and supported, a movement that earnestly sought a homeland for the Jewish people in historic Israel, well, that view has changed in many people's minds around the world. They now see Zionism as a villainous, evil movement determined to evict Palestinians from their homes and annex the lands that they live in. In many ways, the political start of the Israeli settler movement, where some settlers participate in attacks on Palestinian homes and businesses, that political movement began when I was in high school in Brooklyn, New York, in the 1961-1962 school year. I attended what was then the famous Erasmus Hall High School, a school with 7,000 students, extraordinary academic achievements, and an excellent faculty. But there were also ethnic street gangs and gang violence. One of the young Jewish women who lunched with me and my friends every day at school was attacked and raped, allegedly by gang members. It is 65 years later, and I still remember her name, Tamara. An organization that later, by 1968, became known as the Jewish Defense League, started patrolling the streets of Brooklyn as a result of that and other attacks. The leader of these patrols, and what later became known as the JDL, or Jewish Defense League, was a young rabbi named Meir Kahane. He later emigrated to Israel, and the political party he backed had a significant role in today's settler movement. I discussed this with my friend David King, an American who emigrated to Israel and has lived in Haifa for many more years than I have. If you're interested in David, you'll find more details about him in the description of this video on YouTube. For now, let's listen. Let me make 2 points here. Number 1 point is that I think what the world is seeing are settlers committing violence against Palestinians, destroying cars, invading businesses, taking over homes, hurting people, and Israeli soldiers standing by and doing nothing. That's what the world is seeing of the settler movement. That's point number 1 I want to make. And point number 2, Zionism is a term that is now hated by so many people in the world, and yet when you and I grew up, it was so important to us because to us it meant the establishment of a Jewish homeland, especially after the Holocaust. But did it mean taking over somebody else's land or property or business or olive grove? So these are questions that are bothering me, and I wanted to see how you feel about it.
Oh, of course, and those questions bother me as well. And I think that we need to distinguish between the things that you described, which is settler violence, the violation of the civil rights of other people that live in the area, and the issue of settlement. I think that particularly following the Oslo Accords, where Jews and Arabs will settle and live in the not only the West Bank but in other areas as well, and what the end solution will be needs to be an issue of negotiation, and of course extremists on both sides have made that much more difficult, and we completely need to disassociate issues of settlement with violence and with the violation of civil rights of any of the people that live in the area.
But David points out that settlements, which started long before Israel was a state, was indeed a part of the original Zionist notion of creating a Jewish homeland in historic Israel. What does the settler movement make us look like to the rest of the world?
That's a very good question, and I think it's more important, what does it make us look like to ourselves? And I think if we look back at the history of Israel, even pre-state Israel, before the state, when the Jewish settlement began in what became the state of Israel, wherever Jews could settle and create new settlements, they would do that. And that includes what is today known as Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank. Following the War of Independence, 1948, there was an armistice in 1949, and basically that was when they created what today is called the Green Line. At the time, that particular area, the West Bank, was occupied by Jordan, and after 1967, after the Six-Day War, it was, you could say occupied, you could say liberated by Israel. Now, why should it be different after 1948 or after 1967 than it was before? And there were settlements in the West Bank which were abandoned by Israel, for example, Gush Etzion and various other places, and settlers went and resettled those places that they had left. In the meantime, they've also settled a lot of other places where they weren't before. So the question is, when you talk about Zionism, when you talk about Israel, why should settlement before 1948 be different from settlement after 1948? Now, of course, there are lots of reasons why it should be different. We have to talk about practical realities. Can we make peace with our neighbors? A future Palestinian state, where are they going to be, and how do we do that if there are Jewish settlers on that land? But certainly there are people, and those settlers, who see the settlements today as a continuation of Zionism and the settlement of the land of Israel as it always was. When you ask me what Zionism is the continuing existence of the state of Israel as the homeland of the Jewish people, for those Jewish people who decide that they want to live here. And of course, within that framework, we need to be a democratic state, and we need to respect the rights of all of the people who live in our state or in the areas that we control. So clearly, the violence that we have seen in the West Bank is completely unacceptable, and everybody has to reject it.
You raised an issue about, everybody has to respect those rights, and I don't think our government here is doing that.
That's a problem, and you talk about our government, our most recent government, which thank God is going to be up for election soon, is probably the most nationalistic, probably the most ethnocentric government that we have had since the beginning of the state, and that is expressed in a number of ministers, particularly Ben-Gvir, who is the Minister of National Security, and Smotrich, who is the Minister of the Treasury, who are extreme in their views and who have, in my view, been damaging our policy, not only our policy, perhaps most important, our policy and relations with non-Jewish residents of the state, and of the territories, but also it's a horrible it's a horrible face to show to the rest of the world.
You know, what I find really interesting about this is that in the West, in the United States, and in some other countries in Europe, nationalism has become an important part of the political landscape. And in America, it's become white Christian nationalism. And white Christian nationalists generally tend to support Israel, by the way. And now we have this white Jewish nationalism in Israel.
Nationalism, not white Jewish nationalism, Jewish nationalism.
I understand that, but there is a racist element, in my view, a racist element in terms of how we are dealing with our Arab neighbors, and particularly in Judea and Samaria. Now, is it really racist or is it just political? It's hard to tell. What's your thought?
I certainly don't believe that it's racist in the sense that you usually talk about race. Because again, if we talk about Itamar Ben-Gvir, he's Eastern. His parents came from Arab countries. So I don't think that it's racist in the same sense that when you talk about white supremacism, that it's that kind of racism. There is certainly Jewish supremacism, but I think that relates to his view or his movement's view of Jews, Judaism as a people, and as having the right to this particular land. There are certainly members of his movement that may be racist, but I don't think that the things that we're seeing are based on race. I think they're based on ideology, which is a nationalist ideology, and is not based on race.
The war involving Israel, Iran, and the United States has reached a very fragile and tentative ceasefire as of today's recording. Peace talks may or may not achieve what the war has so far failed to achieve, the sometimes changing goals the United States and Israel have stated as the reasons for this war. While we don't really know how seriously Iran has been set back by the war, there are some media and intelligence reports. Well, according to the New York Times, citing U.S. intelligence assessments, the two countries, the United States and Israel, have destroyed 50% of Iran's missile launching capability. So what we've achieved so far is what Israelis refer to as mowing the lawn, knowing that, in fact, we won't dislodge the regime, but rather reduce its ability for a few years before it builds back up again and we have to go back in and do this again.
That may be true. I don't know. And again, in an ideal situation, we would bring regime change. But I think that the Iranians were very, very close to creating a nuclear weapon. I think they were weeks away from weapons-grade uranium. They certainly have missile capabilities to deliver a payload far further than anybody thought they could. They fired a missile at Diego Garcia. And I think that it's possible that they could, at any time, acquire ballistic missiles from North Korea. Mm-hmm. And the North Koreans have the ability to launch ballistic missiles to the mainland United States.
Right.
So I think that this is clearly a significant threat to the United States as well as to Israel. And Americans may not recognize that. It's a very imminent danger.
Well, you mentioned the elections coming up, I think no later than October of this year, 2026. And if there's a regime change here in Israel, and there's a regime change or partial regime change in the United States after November of 2026, the way the world views us may change. And I think, from my perspective, I look at what we say every year at Passover at the end of our services when we say, repair the world. In Hebrew, that's tikkun olam. That's supposed to be our mission. We are supposed to be a light, a beacon unto the world. I don't think that's the way the world sees us.
No, probably not. And some people will never see us the way that we would like to be seen, but we can't really worry about that.
Well, David, thank you so very much for joining me today, and I think we've had a great discussion. And all of you, if you like our discussion today, please subscribe and like, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Haifa Report.